I wonder, we're going through this dynamic called chill, embracing God's fullness. I gave some advice last week to learn how to rest. If you were with us, we talked about rest. Sabbath is part of that dynamic of experiencing who God is. We rest. And I said you should turn your devices off by 7, 8 o'clock at the latest. Get a full 8 hours of sleep for 7 days. And take a 10-minute silence every day. I practiced what I preached this week. So if you sent me an email after 7 o'clock or a text message, I didn't see it. I took everything downstairs. I set my alarm at 7, put them on the bedside table, and said, I'll see it tomorrow. Didn't watch TV after 7 o'clock. Didn't play video games after 7 o'clock. Whatever you do electronically, didn't get on the laptop after 7 o'clock. It was such a peaceful week. And I could actually get a full 8 hours sleep every night this week. And yet I still want an extra pot of coffee this morning. But does that mean I'm not rested? Anybody else try those things out this week? Yeah, how'd it go? It was good? Yeah, it was good this week. Corey's like, man, this is awesome. Like, we're talking, we're hanging out, we're not distracted. It was such a good week. I may have to rest another week. Turn those things off and not watch TV. There's nothing to me worth watching right now until the NBA Finals actually hit. So we'll figure out what happens next week. Oh, man, but it was a restful week. As we talk about Sabbath today, we're going to get into a different conversation. I've hinted at it a little bit. And yes, what I'm wearing is a little bit of a prop today because we're going to talk about recreating. And by recreating, I don't mean vacating. There's a difference between the two. When we think about experiencing God's fullness in our lives, there's a difference between vacating and recreating. So many times we will tell people we just need a vacation, we just need a vacation. And vacation is just that. It is getting away from something. It's escaping. It's fleeing. And God never told us to run from anything except for sin. And you can vacate and never rest or recreate. There's a difference. Just because you lose yourself in a book doesn't mean you found rest and recreation. The whole dynamic of Sabbath in God's world, the whole dynamic of Sabbath is that we would learn to let go of the world around us and live at unity with God, heal unity with creation and with one another. And recreating, you can see it right in the word, it is recreating. It is living into relationship with the creation. So I need some help, though, as we go through this morning, because another word for recreating is play. And I need the kids to help me. So I wonder, any of the kids in the room, would you be comfortable enough to come on stage with me? Could I bring a microphone to you? Hey, keep that knee still. Can I bring the microphone to you? You don't have to come up. Would you talk in the microphone if I brought it to you? I think the kids can teach the grown-up. Would you talk in the microphone this morning? No way. No way. So here's my question. When you think about playing, what comes to mind? What's your favorite thing to play? Do you have a favorite thing to play? What's your favorite thing to play?
Ride my dirt bike and play baseball.
You like to ride your dirt bike and play baseball. Does Dad ride the dirt bike with you? No, my brother does. Your brother does?
Yeah.
Who's better? You? Okay. Does he play baseball also? Who's better? You? What position do you play? Pitcher and shortstop? Do you ever watch grown-ups and watch grown-ups not play? Yeah. What would you tell a grown-up? Like if you could say, here's why playing is so much fun, what would you tell a grown-up? Why is playing fun to you?
Yeah, you get outside and it's kind of just having fun, mostly the part of it, about it.
You get to get outside and have some fun. Okay, grown-ups, show of hands. How many people got outside and had some fun this week? Ooh, look at that. 4 weeks ago, how many of you got outside and had some fun? Oh, temperature had something to do with it. Do you want to talk? What's your favorite thing to play?
Play basketball and ride around on my scooter.
Ride your scooter and play basketball. What is so fun about scootering?
Like going fast.
Going fast.
And going down hills.
Going down hills.
And I like to practice.
Practicing scootering, like doing tricks and stuff?
No.
Have you ever tried that trick where you jump and you can spin the scooter and still land on it? I tried that once. I didn't land on the scooter. I landed on something a little bit different. Oh, man. Okay, grown-ups, your turn. Who's retired in the room? What do you do for fun? She laughs at the pastor. What do you do for fun?
I bowl, I ride bike, I play with the grandkids.
Play with the grandkids, ride the bike. How many of you like to play with your grandkids, if you have them? How many of you want grandkids to play with? We'll get this on film for those who know. I'm kidding. Hey, no time soon. I saw that hand. No time soon. No pressure over there. Anybody? What do you do for fun? Who said mow the lawn? You like mowing the lawn. I love working outside. It's like one of my favorite things to do. I love to work outside. That's what I did Friday after I left the office, and the littles and I worked outside. I made a deal with them, though. For every 40 weeds that you pull, I'll get you a milkshake. I pulled no weeds that day. They got milkshakes, and my yard is 100 weeds less, right? But I did mow and hang out, and they're like, Dad, you pulled no weeds. You're still getting a milkshake. I'm like, yeah, I did the whole yard. So anyway, if Corey was there, it wouldn't have happened that way. Yeah, working outside to me is relaxing. I love to, Corey's like, you should get a riding lawnmower. I'm like, but I like to push mow my yard. I actually enjoy that. It's not work to me. Cutting firewood on the 4th of July in long sleeves, that was work. That's what I remember from growing up on the farm. Why do you cut wood in July? You have to because it's got to burn, right? Throwing hay, that was work. Working in the yard, mowing the grass nowadays, that's not work. What else do you do for fun? Anybody else? Gardening? Board games. What do you do for fun, Dan?
Walk around the lake.
Walk around the lake. Nice. Cindy? Kayak and play pickleball. Anybody else play pickleball? I'm trying to get into it. We'll see how it goes. I feel sorry for everybody else on the pickleball court, especially my partner if that ever happens. There's something about recreating, like taking time and finding time to play is significant. We have to put that in. We talk about Shabbat. That word means rest, taking time off. That's what we see in the command, like to rest. But every time you see Shabbat come up, you find nuach not far behind it, to dwell, to be together in this presence and to be with God. So we cannot really rest if we're not learning to dwell, and part of that dwelling is healing our relationship with the world around us. Now, you may be allergic to being outside. Some people are. I have a family member whose their view of camping is sleeping at Motel 6, right? We're really roughing it when we're at Motel 6. Okay. I still tent camp. I like to sleep on the ground. Like there may come a time and place in my life when camping on the ground doesn't sound so much fun, but I actually like to still tent camp and to be in that space where it's very primitive. I love to wake up in a tent with a little bit of dew on the I guess you could call it a window, the screen, and the birds and just different noises, especially when there's turkeys outside your window. They have great good morning wake-up calls. But to dwell in those spaces, to be in a place, like I love to be outside. I love to be outdoors which is one thing, like being in the wilderness or out on the lake or hiking or whatever, but I love to be outside. And I've grown. One of the best pieces of advice that I was given by our board chairman, Craig Rudd, when we moved here, was you could be the kind of Minnesotan who finds themselves indoors for 6 months. And you will probably hate it here because you didn't grow up here. Or you can go engage the winter and find some space. And we've done now ice fishing and spearing, and we've gone ice skating, and we've gone cross-country skiing, and we throw snowballs at each other, and, we shovel snow. And it's all fun, right? It's all fun and games. But you engage the winter life, and you have to be in those spaces. Part of dwelling and healing the union with creation is part of Sabbath. And if we don't know how to play well, we're going to miss things on God. Sabbath is a gift. The day becomes ours, given to us by God for entry into a wild wonder of his love for us. When we let go of the world around us and we enter into the idea of resting and dwelling, we are entering into a wild world of God's love for us. To be in that space where the creation comes alive and you experience that love is deep. We spent the whole afternoon, Friday, getting ready to chill. We hung the hammocks in the backyard. We got branches out of the way. The ninja playground is up. Everything is in and together, and we have space. We got the cars ready to haul the kayaks. Everything is ready to chill and to play. And that's not a bad thing. Because when we enter into those spaces, we enter into a world of wild love from God. I'm coaching 10U softball girls. I never played girls softball. Shocked at most people. I never played baseball. I was actually scared of the baseball. I had a friend, the first time I got into a batter's box, just kind of messing around with him, when I was in high school, he could throw a pretty nasty curveball, and he backed me off, and I was like, I'm done. I'm going back to track. So I ran hurdles. I threw shot and disc. I did not want to play baseball. I was out. I liked hitting people. I didn't like the idea of getting hit by that little ball. That's why I played football so long, right? But we enter into this wild world of God's love for us. To enter into the realm of play, and this is what we talk about with recreating, to enter into the world of play, we have to give ourselves to something or someone and turn away from everything else. You ever watch children when they enter into a world of imagination? And all of a sudden, your kid is their favorite action star or princess, and there's nothing you can do to talk them off that ledge. Like for the rest of the afternoon, they're Captain America or Thor or one of the G.I. Joes or they're Belle or they're the Beast or they're whomever it is they're pretending to be, their favorite sports figure. And all of a sudden, it's just done, and they're there for the whole afternoon. But here's what kids don't realize. This is the beautiful innocence of it, that when you become an adult, to enter into the world of play and recreation, it's an act of betrayal to the world. Because you have to give yourself over to something or someone else. And yes, you are betraying your workspaces and all the things that demand everything else from you all the time. And it's also an act of faith. Because to enter that world of recreation, to let go of things, to really Sabbath and to be at union with the world, the creation around us, to heal that space is an act of faith because God says to give it to him. When we hear these words, we see that Sabbath doesn't deny work and it doesn't deny sin and death. In the world where God says rest, when he gave the command, work and sin and death were there. When God rested, there was no sin. There was no death. But when the command was given that we should remember this, it was right in front of us. Sabbath is not a denial of those things. Rather, it's a celebration of life. To be in place where we are honoring God and honoring the creation and honoring each other, to enjoy life. 1 Timothy 6:17 tells us that God, he warns the rich, tell the rich to not put their hope in their money, but to put their hope in God, who gives us everything for our enjoyment. We love to read the first part of that. Tell the rich to not put their hope in their wealth. And then we stop. We'll extend it to put our hope in God, but we don't like to admit that God has given us everything for enjoyment. And do you know why? Because sometimes we don't like the stuff that God's given us. We like everybody else's stuff. We don't like what's right in front of us. We want what that person, the Joneses, have. And yet we have this space to celebrate life, and that's what Sabbath ultimately is a celebration of life. Sabbath is far more than a diversion from work. It is an encounter with God's delight. You ever encounter God's delight? This past Tuesday, Corey and I celebrated our 25th anniversary in the most romantic of ways. We went to a 10U softball game, and then we spent the evening going down to someplace past Lakeville to grab a dining room table and chairs for Anna Grace and Zach, who get married in 14 days from yesterday. By the way, you're all invited. And it wasn't romantic at all. There was no dinner involved. I think we had something quick that was just, because it's softball night. It was a space where, as we did those things, as the night kind of came together, I told her, what a beautiful celebration of where we've been for 25 years. For 25 years, God's put us together and we've loved into our kids. We love each other, right? And I'm sure a candlelight dinner that costs 8 times the amount that you would pay at the grocery store would have been incredible to have together. But that night of anniversary and remembrance was spent doing what we've always done. Loving into our kids, experiencing life together, and it was an encounter with delight. It was an encounter with delight. To encounter God's delight is more than just getting away or letting go. It's a space of presence, and recreation and play allow us to do that. Deuteronomy 5:12 is a beautiful reading that we hear about the Sabbath. It is the longest explanation of any command that God gives in the Ten Commandments. Moses is speaking to the people. This is a second generation of Israel. This is a second giving of the commandments. Deuteronomy means second law, because the first generation had turned their backs on God while he was delivering them. That generation would die out before they entered the promised land. And just before they enter the promised land, on that journey towards that space that God had set aside for them, he gives the new generation the commands. And he says in Deuteronomy 5:12, be careful to remember the Sabbath day. Keep it holy, just as the Lord your God has commanded you. You're to labor for 6 days and do all of your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Do not do any work, you, your son, or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or donkey, any of your livestock, the resident alien who lives within your city gates, so that your male and female slaves may rest as you do. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. That is why the Lord your God commands you to keep the Sabbath day. When Jesus is confronted by the young ruler, the wealthy young man who comes to him and he says, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And he actually admits to Jesus about his extravagant lifestyle and the food that he eats. And he talks about keeping every command. But you know what he didn't keep? He didn't honor the Sabbath. Because it says he ate extravagantly every day. That means his servants never had a break. The slaves never had a break. He rested, but he never Sabbathed. He didn't honor the Sabbath. He never brought everyone under his household to live at a space of healed relationship. Play allows us to enter into those spaces. So for all the things that he thought he didn't keep the Sabbath because he didn't give a break to everybody. To set aside the Sabbath isn't just to put away a space of being lazy, of being careless, of vacating. To inherit the Sabbath as a form of play, to live into it as a form of recreation, is to intentionally pursue union with God, union with the creation, and union with others. And so long as we continue to hold over somebody a position or a place, we can't live at union with them. And that's why the slaves and the children and the animals were called to all have this space of break, not just because they couldn't keep working, physically they could, but because that relationship, when God paused and the creation of the universe, and he says, everything's finished, and it's very good. There was a relational harmony and peace between everything, the Creator and his creation. And Sabbath and play call us to be in that space. So we talk about how do we engage this. Sabbath is not about escaping the past. Let me get away from what was the last 6 days. It's about increasingly recognizing and relating to the future. Sabbath is a moment of hope. When we talk about heaven and we talk about what's coming, like the ultimate rest, right? Jesus says, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into your master's rest. What do you think is going to happen there? Can you imagine a world where there is no sickness, no darkness, no sin, no broken relationships, no animosity, no resentment, no weariness, no burden? Sabbath is a witness of hope. It calls us to think about what's going to come. I mean, I don't know about you. I happen to believe that we are not going to be floating on clouds with robes and harps all day. I happen to think that for the very first time in my created life, I will be entering into a relationship with God that is completely unmarred by me, right? That I will have relationship with others that is completely unmarred by them and me. And I will live in relationship to heaven and earth, just as the Bible describes it, in a way where we enjoy the created order perfectly as it was intended. And we will worship, and we will be with God, and we will hike mountains and trails, and everything that is good will be. That's recreation. It's entering into a world of imagination about the hoped-for future that God calls us to. So the things that we find enjoyment and relaxation and the letting go of this world and the burden, where we find that, again, it's not about escaping, it's about healing. If I'm constantly escaping, I can't take time to heal. Some of us look for a world of play and recreation over our hurts and our troubles, and that's what we're intended to do with Sabbath, is to find that hopeful future that guides us and moves us. Play redistributes power, and it gives opportunity. You hear all these things over the last several years about redistributing power in the economy, and how do we lift up people of color, and how do we lift up women, and how do we pay attention to all. When you take a break and you let go of all that is for just a moment, and everybody rests. It's a redistribution of power. The slaves were free, at least for a day. The servants were free, at least for a day. And in the year of Jubilee, everybody was free. Jesus' first sermon, he says, I came to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. The year of the Lord's favor. Jubilee. Where everybody was made free. All debts were canceled. All relationships of empowerment and oppression were ended. Everybody was free. Sabbath mirrors that just for a day. And it helps us to think of a future that's better, where we can live into what is reconfigured and unexpected and often inconceivable. That for just a moment, we have a taste of what's to come. So how do we play with God? Like, there are times when you're like, don't play with God. He doesn't mess around like that. This is not what we're talking about. This is how do I enter into God who enjoys. There's this beautiful psalm that when you start to read the Hebrew, it recounts how God is creating. When you read it in Hebrew, and I won't go through it and spit on the front row and everything, but as you read through it, it talks about how God is dancing and carrying and playing, and he's twirling. And you're going, God? I thought God was a stiff. That's how some of y'all think about God. That he's up on his high and mighty throne. No, he was engaged in the action of creation. And have you ever have you ever played with finger paints? Or have you ever got with modeling clay or something that just really gets you messy as you make something? And you start to see all the stuff come alive. I had this friend who was an artist, and he only used his hands. He never painted with brushes or anything. And he would just take his hands and go to a canvas, and he would put his hands into, these buckets of paint, and he would just start doing like this. And I'm like, all he's doing is grown-up messy time in kindergarten. And at the end of it would be these incredible works of art. Beautiful. And he'd have music playing to it, and he'd kind of dance and whatever. And you're like, what in the world is he doing? But at the end of it, wow. And that's what Sabbath calls us to, is to enter into this God who plays and enjoys and calls us into this. God invites us to play for the victory of union with him. You think about like a parent, like you ever play hide and seek? If you have kids, you ever play hide and seek with your kids? Like, one of my kids tries to hide from me all the time. I always know where she is. Always. Oh, how did you find me, Dad? I can see over everything. But we think about these things like God invites us to play for the victory of union with him. When I go outside, when we play, whether we're throwing the softball around, I take the kids fishing, or we sit on the floor, we play Legos, or we color, whatever it is we do, when we do those things, do you know how much happier my littles are in life? They could do that by themselves all day long and complain. I'm bored. And some of you used to tell your parents that. I'm bored. I was an only child. I didn't have a playmate. I had my brain. I had to imagine everything. Some of y'all had siblings, couldn't stand to play with them. And you go kick the dirt and tell your parents you're bored, and you got a ball outside or a dollhouse or a color book. I'm bored. And every single time I would tell my grandmother I was bored, you know what she would say? Go clean your room. I don't want to clean my room. I'm bored. Well, if you can't find something to do, I will find something for you. Never mind. And really what I was trying to say is I'm not finding joy in life. with the things that are in front of me. I don't know where that is. When we enter into a world of play, we enter into a space of victory with union with God. That's what this whole thing of Sabbath is about. My little girls are so much happier when Dad plays with them. So much happier. And when we learn how to play with Abba, our Heavenly Father, who invites us to play, by the way, our lives are so much more joyful because union is built in play. When we think about this, like Sabbath calls us to play together in the beauty of creation in order to experience delight. Like that's that whole space. You don't have to like being outdoors, but just pay attention to what God has put around you. You know, we're driving yesterday and the sky is clear and you can see the moon in the broad daylight, and one of the girls asked, "Daddy, why can I see the moon right now?" There's not a cloud in the sky. And the sun is still shining on the moon just like it does at night. And you can see it. Whoa. Now, we were in a car. We were stuck at a train. You can probably guess where I am at this point. And we got to enjoy creation just for a minute in that conversation. You know, so we enter into Sabbath to experience this joy, but we have to learn to play. So I want to give you some thoughts about play here, right? Play offers a reprieve from the chaos. Why do we play? Because the world is chaotic. It challenges us to connect with key parts of ourselves that often get lost in the responsibilities of adulthood. You know what my least favorite thing about payday is? It's paying bill. Like, I don't ever see paying Sam. That happens. I've already paid Sam. We're good. But payday, you got to sit down, you got to pay bill. Done. Bill has been on my payroll for a long time. And then I've got an insurance issue. And then, there's that leaky pipe. Yeah, there's those 7 emails I didn't send before I left the office today because it was so sunshiny outside. Oh, man. I got to get gas in the car. We didn't get groceries this week. Adult responsibilities are bummers, aren't they? But it's part of life, and that should be celebrated too in the right way. And in the realm of that, as we age and as we develop, as we enter this world that God has put us in, we should not lose sight of resting and recreating. The adult responsibilities shouldn't overtake us to a point where we can't let go. Especially during crisis. You know, crisis happens and we panic. We don't know what to do. How do we live into this? Can I trust God in my crisis enough just to let go for a moment and enjoy life still? I don't think we've recovered from the COVID crisis. I don't think we've recovered from the racial tensions that seemingly rest quiet in our world until the next incident. We didn't know how to let go. We didn't know how to trust. We didn't know how to enter into and engage one another. And maybe it's because we've forgotten how to play. We've forgotten how to Sabbath. Even in the Christian world, we saw this tension of mistrust, and we still see it unfold. Play isn't something new that you must do. It's tapping back to something that was fulfilling and personal. You start to think about, like how do I really engage this? Like, play is always personal. If you don't believe me, think back to your PE class in school when the teacher had you do something you didn't really like to do. For me, it was tumbling. My body was not really built for tumbling. I absolutely hated the tumbling unit. Like, why in the world do I need to know how to do a somersault forwards and backwards? So long as no one ever knocks me over, I don't need to do a somersault. And they used to isolate me when I was in elementary school. And we had 4 PE teachers, and one of them would just take me to my own mat. Like, I was in like, you know, like if tumbling 101 is what they were doing, I was like in remedial tumbling, right? Eventually I got to where I could do it. But man, oh man, that wasn't fulfilling. I don't go tumble to have fun nowadays. But there are things that I go back to that I enjoy. And if you have to add it to your calendar, there's something wrong with your calendar. It's not a must-do, add to. We got to get this in the right space. And when you Sabbath to play well, you got to be willing to fail, to go try something. Like I tell this when we're going through marital counseling or whatever, we're talking about budgeting, you're going to plan a budget, it's important for you, and you're going to fail like the first 5 times. Don't give up, keep working it out. Like no one gets their budget right the first time. If you do, you did something wrong. You didn't enter numbers right, you fudged it somewhere. I mean, budgeting is like a 5-6 time experience. I think this is how it works. Cool, we're going to make this happen. Play's the same way. Have you ever played a game and the first time you played it, you lost? Or maybe you have beginner's luck. The first time you played it, you won. Corey and I went on our second date. On our second date, we were going to a movie. And the movie had some time. We went to evening services. This is way back in the day when churches went to church on Sunday night. And we were going to go to a movie after church. But we had some time, so we went to the arcade that was next door to the movie theater. We played air hockey and Mortal Kombat. She beat me at air hockey by 1 point. To this day, I swear it's because I ricocheted too hard and shot it back at myself. She won't play me at air hockey again. There's a reason why we have a table over there, by the way. I'm waiting for that challenge. And then Mortal Kombat, like I knew all the fancy moves. Back, left, A, B, C, do. And she's just tap, 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 and she beats me. And we've never played again. Beginner's luck, right? Sometimes when you play, you fail at first, but it's still play. But as you get older, you become so afraid of failing that you forget how to play. You forget that some risks are worth taking. So take the risk. It's how we learn to love again. We come near to Sabbath not simply by stopping the oppressive routine, but often we come up short in that. We get rid of the oppressive routine, but we still don't restore and recreate. And true Sabbath is both letting go and resting into and playing. And we have to be careful that we don't miss the whole picture of it. We get more of God of what we desire. God tells us he gives the desire of the heart. When we desire God, the more we desire him, the more wild the adventure becomes with him. We get of God what we desire. And he calls us to set our desire on him. And the more we desire of him, the more wild the adventure gets, because he will meet you and match you at that love. When you seek me, you will find me. He says it all day long. We come into that space. So how do we chill then? When it comes to recreating, how do we take time? Just like I did last week, showing you spaces where here's how you take time to rest. Here's how you find time to play. Think about this. What would I do for 24 hours if the only criteria was to pursue your deepest joy? If I said you have 24 hours to pursue your deepest joy, what would you do? If your answer is spreadsheets, I have available counseling next week. Right. What would you do to pursue? Actually, some of you really love spreadsheets. That was me being facetious. What would you do? Without really paying attention and unintentional to the morning, that's kind of how I felt happen since Friday. We worked hard together, me and the littles, to get the yard ready. We had family over. We've barbecued together. We've gone to the lake together. We've played softball together. We've just been in space. If I had 24 hours to pursue my deepest joy, I would want to hang out with my family doing all the things that we love to do and just be in that space. And that time becomes even more critical because I've got another kid who's fixing to move out of the house. That time won't always be available. So you make it where it is. What would you do? Would you go walk through the woods? Would you spend time on a boat? Would you want to read a book? Do you want to watch your favorite TV show uninterrupted? Do you want to sit in a hot tub for 24 hours? I don't know. I mean, you'll be wrinkly after a while, but some of you already are. So how do you bring that in? What would you pursue with your deepest joy? What would that look like? And somewhere in that, we're not talking about just like a raw hedonism, just pleasure for pleasure's sake. Because if I'm pursuing joy, the way God talks about pursuing joy, I'm going to find him along the way. And not just find him, but be with him. So what are some ideas about play? One, know your play style. Did you know you have a play style? Every one of us has a different kind of play style. They are connected to our personality. So here you go. You may be others-directed. If you like to play with other people, you're an others-directed player. Some of you don't want to have others involved in your play. You want to do your Sudoku quietly, or the morning crossword quietly, uninterrupted, and that is like great joy for you. You want to read your book without anyone around. You may want to do word puzzles. That's going to be more that intellectual dynamic, right? Where stimulating your mind is joyful. You may be the lighthearted, just kind of go skip through the woods, kind of skip in the park kind of person. Go whip up a cake with whatever ingredients you have. Last night we had, I am not turning the air conditioner on just yet, right? Like if we're not there yet. But someone wants to bake in the house, and they want to make lemon bars. And so the next thing I know, they're looking at how do you put lemon bars on a barbecue grill? And I'm like, we'll see, And so there's this dynamic. Maybe that's you just kind of whip up something. Share some laughter with somebody. Or maybe you're just spontaneous and silly. You have that whimsical play style. Like you don't know what's going to happen, but you know it's going to happen, and you're there for it, right? So know your play style and engage in those things. Where does that fall for you? When you think about play without sharing. No social media. Just do the thing for the thing's sake. Don't worry about if you get pictures of it. And if you do want to take pictures, take them for yourself. Maybe that's your thing. That's where you find joy. But so many times, like I watch when you go to sporting events, and this happened recently with the Lakers and the Nuggets, and LeBron James has the ball in the last seconds, and everybody is watching the game in the stadium through their phone. Like, if I wanted to watch on a screen, I could have done it for free on my TV. Like, we've gotten to a place where we don't know how to not look through the screen anymore. Just put the screen down. If you take a picture because you want the memory, but don't share it. Like, we've never been told we can play without sharing. Every time I want to play, you got to share, right? Play without sharing. No social media. Just do it for the joy of it. Don't worry about if someone knows that you did it, right? And then plan playtime. If you are not planning time to take a break, if you're not watching your schedule, you will overwhelm your schedule with everything else. It's just like money. If you don't take time to plan your money will do what it wants to do. Other people will tell your money where to go. If you don't tell your time, this is playtime. If you don't tell your time, this is playtime, you won't have any. You have to steward that time. In the Jewish culture where Sabbath came from, it was from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, what we call in our time. It was marked every single week. Everybody knew when it was supposed to be. What we call Sunday is the first day of the week. That's how John talks about it. It was on the Lord's Day, the first day of the week when the resurrection occurred. It's how we read it in Revelation. But the end of the week was reserved for rest and enjoyment with each other. You may not be able to schedule that day for that thing, but if you don't mark your time, you will not enter into a world of Sabbath. It's intentional. It's not accidental. Schedule some playtime. That's your challenge for the week. Go play, recreate, live into the union with God, the creation, and others. It ultimately is what Jesus lived and died for, to heal that broken union, to bring together everything that fell apart because of sin and to find its place in healing and wholeness.